We are live.
And there we are.
Good morning. I'm Jim.
And I'm Kevin.
And we are
the Signal Brothers. Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody to our inaugural broadcast here, our podcast. Hey, glad to have those that are watching. Hey, this is an exciting time for us. Jim and I have been talking about doing this for quite some time. And what we've realized is there's a lot of people out there that get really upset about talking about things that are controversial. And we're not here to stir the pot. We're here to learn and grow and have a conversation about those things that rub people wrong. Not because we want to stir the pot, just because we want to make sure that we can understand other people's perspectives, learn and grow, learn to have a conversation, and make sure people don't get flustered. Walk away and learn something from something that somebody thinks that's different than you. So real quick, we're going to share with you, this is why we're doing this. I already covered that for you. And we got 5 rules for when we're on this podcast. And it's important because, again, we don't want to create drama, right? So when we're talking about stuff, we're going to be tackling issues, not people. We're going to be trying to use emotional intelligence in every way, in the perspective of how we deliver information, and we expect our guests to do the same. Listen to people and don't interrupt them. It's quick to cut somebody off when they don't agree, but we need to listen to people, hear them out, hear their side of the story, and then have your feedback, right? Obviously, we're not going to agree on everything, so we should agree to disagree, and we should learn and grow from these experiences. So a little bit about me. I spent 20 years in the Army, 13 years active duty, 7 years reserved, did 20 years as a civil servant, did quite a bit of time in working for the government. For those that, a lot of people don't know that I was a 28-year registered Democrat. And this is not about politics, but I am no longer a Democrat. I'm registered Republican today. And so I'm proud of that, by the way. And so I come with perspectives that are probably a little bit different than most people, since I've been on both sides of the house. Joy working, joy having conversations with people. And Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce yourself a little bit.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jim. Like Kevin, I served in the Army, though not quite as long. I served 6 years active duty. Since then, I've been in government healthcare. And like Kevin, I grew up a Democrat. I was a Democrat most of my young life. And I consider myself a Republican now, though I see parts of myself on both sides of the fence. So it's kind of like that. And like he was saying earlier, you know, we just want to get together and we want to talk about things and we want to learn and we want to know, because the most important opinion you'll ever hear is the one that's not yours. You know, how do you grow without hearing that kind of thing? You know, if everybody thought the same, there'd be no growth. There'd be no experiences to learn from. So, you know, we just want to present you with a forum that can be constructive as opposed to combative.
Well, great. We're going to jump right into our scheduled topic about government spending, and it's a great topic to talk about today with the deficit where it is. And by the way, while we're doing this, if you have any questions or comments, hey, put them in the chat. If you'd like to show up on this podcast, hey, send a message to Jim and I. We'll set up an appointment, talk to you, find out what you want to be on there about, make sure we got a good plan for what you want to talk about, and we can definitely get you on our podcast. We'd be happy to do so. So while there are many perspectives on government spending, here's the facts, folks. We are $36 trillion in debt and growing. So I put up this counter. I'm not promoting Peter G. Peterson's. The reason I used his is because it's just pretty simple. And you can see that it's constantly growing, right? Serious problem. Spending in this country is out of control. I think regardless of where you stand politically, I think we can all agree that spending is out of control. Go into, the treasury.gov, you'll see that this year alone, we're $710 billion in the deficit, right? $201 billion deficit more than last year. So, I mean, that's a serious concern that our country and our politicians have to get under control. The other part that's super, super important is a lot of us, at least folks I know, right, are either collecting Social Security or about to enter the age to start receiving Social Security. Well, the fact of the matter is, in 2035, right, if Congress doesn't do something about Social Security, there's only going to be enough money in there to pay 75% of the benefits, which for some people who live by Social Security, that is a huge impact. So that's what we're here to talk about today. What are we going to do about government spending? What are we going to do to get our spending under control? So, Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you for your thoughts.
Well, a good measure of this happened just recently. It's a good example to start with, is we just experienced last month the discussions of a government shutdown. And if y'all remember that, I mean, not going into great detail about it, that we avoided it. And then shortly after we avoided it, we've got all these problems. We're getting ready to, not pay people, in government. And then all of a sudden, as soon as we're clear, we send $2.5 billion over to Ukraine. Now, not saying that they're not struggling over there, but, how can we come out of a situation like that and then justify that kind of spending? And again, that kind of spending, not that specific. That's just a good example. But my opinion on it, I mean, it's a lot easier to send money overseas than it is to spend here because, I mean, come on, let's be real. There's laundering going on. It's circulating back. That's speculation, of course, but we've got people hurting over here too. And I don't want anybody in the world to suffer. I don't want anybody in the world to hurt, but we've got, masses of people pouring in unchecked at the southern border. We've got people, the economy's killing them. They can't eat. They can't keep a roof over their head. They're going homeless. They're losing their homes. We just lost the fires in California, the tornado and floods and everything in North Carolina. I mean, yeah, we've got, it's like the Wizard of Oz. When she said, I'll look for happiness no further than my own backyard, you've got to start at home. When you're on an airplane and they drop those masks down, what do they tell you? Put yours on first before you try to help anybody else. Because if you're gone, you're worthless to anybody else. If we spend ourselves into bankruptcy, we're not helping anybody at that point. So that spending, it's got to get under control. But if we're spending, let's invest in our own people a little bit. That's my big point. We got to stop sending so much money out of the country. If we're hemorrhaging that much and we're racking up that much, not to mention, what are we borrowing and what are we borrowing against to send that money outside of our own? We're putting ourselves in debt. We can't police the world. We don't have the resources to police the world. In a perfect world, everybody work together. There'd be no hunger. There'd be no, famine. There'd be no, but that's not how it is. Do you see Russia pouring money over to us? The Middle East pouring money over to us? I mean, they've got their rich oil execs and everything going on. They're not sending money to us. And I could go on that topic forever, but the spending's got to get under control. And the way they pad the bills, if we need to send, whatever, I'm going to grab a number. If we need to send $50 million to California to help them out, let's not write up a bill that that does $500 million and pad that money elsewhere. All the little policies and all the little, companies and all the little things that they send money to that they throw into a bill. If we're providing relief to California, we need to provide relief to California and not pad that bill with all these other things. And that's where a lot of that comes on. You go to the grocery store and you think, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get milk, bread, eggs, some meat, and I'm going to come home. And you get in that store, oh, the eggs are on sale. Oh, look at that. The cookies are on sale. And before you know it, that racks up to a lot of money. And that's part of the problem is lack of control. And the funny thing is, it's easier to spend money when it isn't yours. You know?
Hey, Jim, that's a great point. But this is a place that Jim and I can really disagree, right? So, yeah, well, yes, sending $2.5 million to Ukraine, right, when we have needs here. But Jim and I have talked about this before, right? Here's the deal: is we have no choice but to spend the money in Ukraine. Here's the great thing: is as far as we know, right, there may be covert operators in the Ukraine fighting against Russia. We don't know. But as far as we know publicly, right, that we don't have a single soldier fighting that war. And I will tell you that if we don't spend the money, from my perspective, on the Ukraine, right, that war will spill over into the other countries, right? So I think is all the money being spent properly? Probably not, right? The reality is though it's kept American soldiers out of that war. Number one, and number two, it's kept it from spilling over. But Bill, Jim, you brought up a great point, right, about padding bills, right? So one of the things in my time working for the government that really drives me nuts is the federal acquisition regulation, right? That's the Bible on how the government employees spend money, right? And so the problem with the FAR is there's dollars dedicated to a fiscal year. And if you don't spend that money in a fiscal year, right, you lose that money the next year. So what does it cause people to do? There's a lot of reasons why budgets that are planned don't get spent in the government. And we can get into, that's probably a whole nother topic we can discuss, right? But the reality is we encourage people to blow money in the government at the end of the year just to spend money. I have seen in my time at the 10 years working at the Pentagon, I've seen millions and millions of dollars just spent for the sake of spending it, right? We got to change the FAR. We got to change it where we reward people. I don't mean financially rewarding them, but we got to reward our employees for being fiscally responsible and turning money in, bottom line, right? That alone would probably save us billions of dollars across the federal government. And Jim, going on with what you said about padding bills, right? These bills that the Congress writes, right? 1,000-page bill. Who's going to read 1,000-page bill, right? Let's break these bills down. That's one of the things that the Republicans have been talking about doing, right? And I'm not tooting the Republican horn here, but I really believe that each bill should stand independently. We got to stop padding these bills to get other congressmen and senators to approve the bill. Let's put the bill out there. Let's see who voted for it and who voted against it. That's what we need to do. This is why our spending is out of control, right? So Congress and Doge want to be concerned about how the government spends the money, but let's look at the politicians and how they are allocating the money. There's a lot of allocations out there that are wasteful. Jim, over to you.
Yeah, another thing that I see when it comes to government spending, like I mentioned, I'm in government healthcare, and I've been there for 25 years. I work a lot with Medicare, CMS, the Medicaids, the amount of Medicare fraud, and the amount that they will, to see them spend on what they spend and deny what they deny is sometimes just incredulous. It's just unbelievable. And the amount of fraud that I've seen, and I've had clients that have had their, billing number suspended. I've had people investigated. I've been in the past. If you're working on these accounts, obviously you're going to be questioned, when that's being investigated. So, to Kevin's point, he's talking about Social Security. Well, that's Medicare. So if we don't get that part under control as well, what are you going to do, when you're trying to go to the hospital when you're 70 years old and there's no more Medicare? Because so much fraud has been committed. And to that point also is the whole insurance thing. Why do you think insurance costs so much? Why do you think bills in the hospital cost so much? I had a surgery, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years ago, and it was $20,000. contract agreement with the hospital wrote off $18,000 to begin with. And of course, they were only responsible for 80% of that remaining $2,000. That right there will tell you that, will they overbill? It's like when you sell a car. I want $5,000 for this, so I'm going to ask for 10. He'll talk me down to 6 or 7, and I'll be better than I wanted. That's the same idea. That needs to be reined in as well. We need to stop paying those prices from the Social Security, pool on those inflated medical bills. That's part of the problem with the Social Security right there. Is we're literally spending too much. That's not saying that people don't need it. It's the insurance companies. They're in some sort of collusion, or they're just feeding off of each other, because as long as they pay the prices, the hospital is going to keep them up. Because, before the ACA, you used to be able to walk in and do a self-pay. And if you've ever done that, that most of the time that hospital will knock 80 or 90% off the top if you're a self-pay. They know they're not going to get it. And they don't need it anyway, because the service doesn't cost that much. So, that hurts your pocket. But when you look at the government spending that money, that hurts us. That hurts the entire program. So that's just one more area of government spending that maybe force more regulations on the insurance companies. But then what happens to your private insurance? What's the answer? If your private insurance is going to go up, well, I guarantee you it doesn't cost, $30 for a Tylenol in a hospital. It's an old reference, but you get what I mean. It could just be regulated a lot better. But when they allocate money for that, and they keep talking about how they're pulling money out of the Social Security fund, we're talking 2 different funds here or more. Because you got money that's going straight to, at least it's supposed to be, feeding itself. There should be no tapping that, and we do. And then we've got folks talking about how that's an entitlement. It's not an entitlement. What happens when you've spent 50 years working, paying into that, and then somebody says, "Oh, Kevin, you know what? I can't give any money to go to the doctor this month, or this year, or ever." And people, well, if I'd have kept that money, for 50 years, every week for 50 years, I wouldn't need that program. Because that, nickel and dime, and that adds up. You pay, I don't know what the percentage is for that off the top of my head, but you pay, say, $30 a week, 52 weeks for 50 years, adds up,
So one of the areas that Jim and I have been discussing is, reducing the government size, right? And, there's a lot of discussion with the incoming administration that, we need to eliminate portions of the government. We need to seriously reduce size of the government. One area that's up for the topic is the Department of Education, right? And should the Department of Education go away? Well, I don't think it should go away. I think that we need standards. I think we need minimum standards set by the federal government for each state. A minimum standard they have to meet for education for public schools, right? But I definitely think the Department of Education has gotten too big and has swayed into too many lanes as far as what they're covering and what they're regulating out there for education. I think education needs to be regulated by the states, right? The states it's a state program, right? We are a republic. The states are independent, right? We will come together for common things, right? Common defense. And there are things that the federal government should oversee. But let's be honest. The Department of Education could be seriously slimmed down. Set the standards that the states need to meet at each grade. What are the minimum requirements that a kid at each grade needs to meet? There are several things that can be changed and about the Department of Education. Jim, what's your take on the Department of Education?
At the federal level, if the states are controlling each of their own independently, like they're able to do, and set up their own requirements and for this and that, at the federal level, it should be minimal. It should be minimal, more of an oversight than a regulatory type of thing. If the state does something that people don't like, or the state does something, all of a sudden, whatever state, say Arizona, plummets over 3 to 5 years in their education standards. Department of Education say, okay, what's going on? Let's get together with you. Let's help you. Let's not control you. Let's help you. Let's see if we can figure this out. Do we need to divert funds? Do we need to help you out? What's going on? As opposed to actually regulating and slapping, you're going to do this. And once they do that, you can slim it down. And that money that you're no longer spending could go to the states or could go to other programs. Because can the states run the education by themselves? I believe they can. Just an oversight. It just needs to be an oversight. It's got too much power, and you can tell that with the number of people pulling their kids out of public schools and homeschooling them. Two of my kids were homeschooled. I left it to their mother's decision. She had custody, so she saw it every day, gave me the reasons, and I'm like, if he or she can still get a decent education, and you're comfortable with that, and you got it covered, I don't have a problem with it. And they went on to do great things. So, you see people doing that, and once that's done, and we can trim some of the fat, so to speak, off of the Department of Education federally, there's just some funds released. There's just some funds released right there. Now, what they're going to do with them, that's a whole other discussion, unfortunately.
So we got a great question from Ian out there, Jim. He said, how do you ensure federal standards when the state is responsible for education standards? For example, children in West Virginia don't receive the same quality of education as a child in California, New York, et cetera. It's a valid point, Ian. That's what we're saying. We're saying that we got to set minimum standards so that children in West Virginia get the same education as those in California, New York, and across the board. What is that minimum standard, right? And then ensuring that those states meet those minimum standards, right? That's the requirement that we think that the Department of Education has in ensuring that every kid gets the same quality education, a minimum standard that the states must meet in educating their children. So I hope that answers your question, Ian.
Yeah.
That's what we think the role is of the Department of Education.
If I could expand on that, if the federal government were to act as a facilitator instead of a regulator, if California or whatever state has a model that's working, and you've got a state like West Virginia who's failing, put those two together. Get some educators from California, some educators from West Virginia, put them together. So what are you guys doing? What can you show us? What can we learn from you? Help facilitate that. Help get them together. And once you get that model going, once you get that precedent, that can take off on its own. These states working together instead of saying, I've got my own thing. We're doing good. So we're worried about Arizona. We're not worried about West Virginia. We're not worried about California. But they need to get together anyway, because I brought this point up and Kevin and I were talking the other day. They have different age settings for when they start school too. For example, you could live in one state, and I don't know all the ages. I used to when my kids were in school, but I don't remember them all now. If you had a kid going to school in this state and you moved for work or for whatever reason to this state, all of a sudden they could be back a grade. And then they're learning the stuff they've already learned. Or even worse, the opposite. They're bumped up a grade because of their age. And they've missed an entire year of learning. That child now is going to fail for the next several years. So there needs to be some sort of balance there. And that's where I think the federal government could do that oversight, get the states to come together, but they don't need to lay the law. They need to let the states do that. But the point is valid. You do have states that are doing far worse in education than others. But I think the solution to that, at least part of the solution, is to get them together and see what they can learn off each other.
That's a great point. In moving on to another program, right? I think a great one to talk about is welfare, right? So I definitely think it's a needed program, right? I don't think it's a program that we need to abolish, right? I think it's needed out there, right? Problem is that there's people that live on that program a majority of their life, right? And obviously, I'm not saying that every situation is simple. There are those people that are probably going to need welfare for life, right? And those should be the exception rather than the rule. But we got to develop a program where we can graduate people off of welfare, right? We got too many people that it's easier for them to stay on welfare and stay home than it is to go out, get a job, education. Yes, they have kids and there's childcare costs. It's a whole nother topic we can get into is childcare costs today because those are through the roof. But welfare is a program that I think that is overused, right? And we don't have a path to get people off of that program, right? So, Jim, what's your thoughts on welfare?
It is definitely a needed program. I mean, and I've got no problem at all helping people up when they need it. I mean, that's why it's there. I've used it. My family, me and my kids have been on it. My mother and us, we were on it when we grew up in Ohio. We were on it. And as soon as, the situation that we were in was over, we got off of it. And I've been back and forth on it several times. Loss of a job, sick child, whatever the case may be, that's there to help these people. But you're right. People do spend their entire lives on it. It's like, why should I bother going out there? And, it doesn't promote ambition, if they can just sit back and get free money, why am I going to bother? The government gives me everything I need, which I think, in all honesty, I think is part of a design. You keep the people dependent on you. They don't fight you. Why would I fight somebody giving me free money? As far as programs to get people off of welfare, when I mentioned I grew up in Ohio, shortly after I became an adult, I don't remember the time frame, it's 30 years ago. I'm thinking 80s, 90s. They did institute a program in Ohio where, and I don't know what it is now, but back then they did this. So it's a good example where you could not draw welfare or food stamps unless you were working, and they helped you get a job. And I know people personally that came off welfare for the first time in their lives. One gentleman I know just retired from being a security guard for 30 years that he worked. He had never worked before in his life. So those programs work. As long as people are willing to work with them. But some people, you threaten their free money, and that's going to be an issue. But again, we can't police the whole country any more than we can police the whole world. We've got to have assistance. People have to be willing, and I think most people are, to do at least their fair share, if not more. Most people do more. And like you said, it's the exception, it's not the rule. Most people use it when they need it, and then they move on. And that's what it's there for.
So, Jim, let's move over to the Department of Defense, right? One of the largest budgets we have, right? And my God, I think it's close to $1 trillion, right? My goodness, it's a huge budget, right? And defense is important. I think everybody can agree defending our country and keeping our country free, and also championing those ideas out there across the world, right, that are in favor and aligned with our strategic interests are important. But my God, I've been working for the federal government. I've worked for the government for 30 years. So I think the DOD needs a big budget, but I just think it's way too big. I think it's overinflated. If you look at the cost of what we're paying for some of the stuff in the Department of Defense, it is out of control. It's completely out of control, right? And what I've watched is certain things we've tried to, I'll give you an idea, IT in the federal government. While it's supposed to be a best value contract, most of those contracts have become lowest price technically acceptable, even though they're not supposed to be. Right. But let's look at the cost of the aircraft and the aircraft carriers, the ships, the planes, all the things that the defense is using. Right. And so the prices start at a certain price, but then they snowball. Right. They snowball because we don't have people in charge of these programs long enough. And then the next guy comes in or next gal comes in. Right. And they got their own ideas of what that program should entitle. So they make mods to the contract. And what happens is, the price of these items grow, right? They grow insurmountable. If you look at what we're paying for the new strike fighter, right? it's unfathomable that we're paying that much for a plane. Do I want the best technology for our defense? 100%. But where's that bottom line? Where is enough, and where do we say this is the cutoff of the technology we're going to put into this fighter, right? And then we're going to look at putting together the things we want in a future fighter and start developing, those technologies for the next generation fighter. Jim, what's your take on spending in the Department of Defense?
Wow, pretty much that. I get the same as you. We definitely need to defend ourselves. And we need to, like, despite my earlier talks about sending money overseas, we do need to champion other places that may, cause us problems, or may that, because again, nobody wants to see a people oppressed. But I mean, how do you get peace? You got the bigger stick. That's the only thing that keeps peace. I think we could, if we're going to spend the money we're spending on defense, I think we could funnel it a little bit toward our southern border if we're going to be spending some money, and that would save us some money. But when I worked where we were stationed together, I did database conversions, and I saw parts lists for planes and missiles, and I was blown away. I mean, it was more zero. I had to spread open my daggone column to be able to see the whole number. It was just more money than I'd ever calculated in my entire life, and I'm just, how in the world can they justify this? And then what happens when you have one that doesn't work? You spend all this money, all this time, all these man hours, and you've got something you can't even use. What do you do with it then? You scrap it. You scrap it for parts. You melt it down. What do you do? Obviously, you don't want to sell off our technology, but what do you do when you got something that doesn't work? It's out of control, the same as, and I think it's padded just like everything else. I mean, what was it a few years ago? I heard what our spending in defense is more than the next 26 countries combined or something. It's ridiculous. It's necessary, but it's padded. It's definitely padded.
Just a reminder of folks that are out there watching, and hey, if you got questions, like, put them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer those questions to the best of our ability from our perspective. Also, hey, we'd be interested to know, what topic do you want us to cover for our next podcast, right? Because we don't have a next topic lined up. We can certainly pick one. We'd love to know what you'd want to hear about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Jim.
And as a reminder, you see the ticker at the bottom of your screen. This is purely our thoughts. We're not representative of anybody or anything.
Yeah, spending in a federal government is really something, Jim, that I think everybody agrees has got to change. I think the question of how we get there, you brought up the border, right? The border is part of that defense strategy, right? And I'm not even going to get into the illegal immigrant conversation. I'm going to leave that alone. Let's talk about what else is coming through the border.
Exactly.
Right?
That was
and
more
it's not just
my point.
the southern, and it's just not the southern border. It's the northern border as well, right? Because we've seen a lot of incursions in there, right? We've had a lot of people come across the border that probably are less desirable than we want, right? When I say less desirable, I'm talking about people from that have intent to do us harm in this country, right? Let's talk about the drugs that are coming through the southern border, right? The fentanyl, and there's some other drug now there that's even more potent than fentanyl coming through the border, right? And so it's not just the border, it's from the shores, it's from the oceans, right? It's from air, it's from all over, right? We got to stop thinking on the single facet that the only thing we need to do is build a wall, right? We need to think above and beyond that, because when all we think is we're going to put up a wall to stop stuff coming through, they're going to dig tunnels underneath. They're going to use the ocean. They're going to use the air. So we need to really take a multifaceted look at using technology to protect our borders. At the end of the day, there's too many things coming through our borders that should not be there, right? And it's a place, I think, that Department of Defense, everybody says, well, it's the Board of Homeland Security. It's Homeland Security. It's Customs Border Patrol. It's a bunch more than that. There's defense issues there. right? And securing our borders that are super important. Jim, your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right, Kevin. I mean, if you put up a wall, they're going to go around it, but you've got to do something. I mean, and my big thought on this is you've traveled enough on planes. Most people listening have. If they had the same checks at the border that they do at the airport, you know what I mean? It's like, why is it so much different? Why is there so much difference in how they check you with the driving across the border as they do flying into an airport? It seems to me that, you catch a lot more coming in, but if you throw up the wall or you throw up whatever you're going to throw up, are you going to stop it? No. You'll slow it down. Maybe you'll slow it down to a manageable flow. But if you have it flowing in unchecked, you throw one guy in there with a bag of fentanyl, he's going to have a lot easier time slipping through. And, like the cartels, they'll take 10 mules and they'll do whatever they do to get, have them swallow it or whatever they do. If they get 9 through and one's caught, that's a good day for them. They don't care about those mules. They'll throw 100 if they have to get 50 through. And when you're doing the volume that's coming through, both north and south and wherever else, that volume is coming through. The more volume you have, the less control we have, the easier it is to get it in. But, and this has been a topic of discussion before, not with us, but other places. How much does the drug trade actually boost the American economy? That's a whole other discussion. But I mean, what does it do for the economy? I mean, it's not a good thing, but it's been discussed before, even as far back as probably further than this. But I'm thinking Vietnam. I'm thinking stuff like that. Bringing in all the opiates and bringing in all the that's always bolstered the American economy. Good or bad. Whether you like it or not. But we do need the Department of Defense is really Department of Defense. That needs to be part of the defense. If they need to work with Homeland to do it, joint effort, task force,
We're getting a lot of comments in there. Ian has said DHS should exist. What has the department accomplished since its creation 2001? Hey, Ian, valid point. In order for a department to be valid, it's got to show it's bringing value. I would concur on that. Hey, Chris, thanks for your comment there. American made. Amen, brother. We agree. We should be making things here in this country, right, and stop importing a lot of stuff. It's a great point. Ed, got your comment there. Drug is its own economy. We agree. And then we got Ian talking about arguably, he says, certainly seems the scope of the border could arguably fall into the DOD now, given how eroded the border has been the past 20 years. And that's a pretty valid point, right? It's a national defense thing. And so Ian, in line with your said, if DHS doesn't exist, then, does it become a DOD responsibility? It's a great point. And I don't think it's something we'll solve here, but I definitely think there's a mandate for the DOD to be involved in helping in this effort. Another place, and just changing subject, folks, because we do want, we got about 22 minutes left, and we are appreciating the comments and the viewers that are out there. And just want to express our appreciation because we're doing this right because we really want to have good conversations about things that make people uncomfortable, right? So how about infrastructure, the national infrastructure, Jim? Here's an area that's probably neglected, right? Think about, you brought up the $2.5 billion that was just recently given to Ukraine. What could $2.5 billion do for the infrastructure, our failing infrastructure in this country?
What was the last count of the number of bridges that need replaced throughout the country? I mean, it was a huge number. I mean, just safety like that, most buildings and everything are privately owned. So I'm not talking about that. We're talking roadways. I'm talking, what would $2.5 billion have done for North Carolina? We had to cancel a trip because we couldn't drive through Asheville because the 40 was gone. I mean, just it wasn't just, cluttered. It was gone. That kind of thing. That's an emergency type of thing. But as far as regular basic infrastructure, I mean, the bridges are the first thing that come to mind, because if you've, I watched a thing on bridges a year or so ago, and there are like thousands upon thousands of bridges that should be shut down throughout the country, and you get a few of those collapsing on a few roadways. I mean, not only are you inconvenienced, but then you've got your trucking routes that are delayed or completely blocked, which means, food for people, medical services, ambulance is going to take, 10 minutes longer to get to the hospital, taking an alternate route because that road's closed, because that bridge is collapsed, due to poor maintenance. I mean, it just snowballed, like, to use your phrase, it snowballs when it comes to that. And not just infrastructure, but, services for people. People that need help, like you talked about the welfare program. It could be funneled to that. It could be, so many things could be done with that kind of money. It's just, I hate to see other people in the world suffer, but you got to put that mask on yourself first before you can help anybody else.
We got another comment out here. It's a pretty good one. Annie had put out there, what are your opinions on companies sending jobs overseas, India, Romania, etc.? Do you see taxing that in some way to bring those jobs back to America? Absolutely, Annie. America first, right? We have to start producing in this country, right? We should be thinking about technology. One of the things Elon Musk had said, hey, we don't have enough engineers in this country, right? We should be expanding the H-1B visa program, right, to bring in engineers. It comes down back to our whole point about education, right? What is our education program really teaching kids to grow and learn, right? So back to your question, Annie, 100%. Right, when we're shipping jobs overseas, right, when companies are taking jobs overseas, right, we're taking away from our economy to produce. There's probably things that we don't want to produce here, Annie. There are probably things that we want to be produced in other countries because they're just better at it, right? But when it comes to technology, when I look at space industry, right, that should be here. We should be the leaders in the space industry, right? So the engineers to foster that. And so I agree. We should be taxing those companies, and I think that's part of the plan of the incoming administration to tax imports. Right, is to force these companies to look at, why are they pushing jobs overseas? Why are they doing that? Why are they sending it over there? Is it because it's cheaper to produce there? Right? What can we do to produce it here competitively in the U.S.? With AI and ML coming and robotics, there's no reason why we can't do a lot of that here in this country. Jim, over to you. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, most of this is focused on goods. What about services? Anybody that's ever called support for any product they have, I mean, you can barely talk to the folks because you're calling a company overseas. And especially in the healthcare industry, we have a lot of companies that we work with overseas, Pakistan and a few other places, India, Pakistan. I can't remember the other country I'm trying to think of, but a lot of those data centers and stuff over there, call centers, support. You call support, you're gonna get over there, and that's not a good that we would have a problem with. Like say something that's made, well, they produce better steel or whatever, nickel over there. We have plenty of people. We don't need to worry about what we can pull out of the ground to manufacture something with. We got people. We got people that need to work. We got people without jobs, and we got people on welfare, and we've got these huge companies overseas that are contracted to do tech support for Dell, Verizon, any number of these companies, that you can talk to. And it's, I don't even understand why, because half the time you can't understand. And it's not that, it's a language barrier for sure. And that's not saying anything bad about anybody. It's common sense. You grew up speaking two different languages. You're going to have a problem. Those people can work over here. Now they need to have an incentive to have that call center here. What are the incentives to have a call center here? When Dell came to Middle Tennessee, 40 years on that land without taxation. That's an incentive to build. The size of that property that Dell built, 40 years with no taxes, that's an incentive. Give them, I don't know, tax-free property to build on. It's something. We've got to give them some incentive, because if they're saving money, it's a triage thing. You got 100 people, they got problems. You have problems solving 20 of them, but you solved 80. 80 of them were fixed. That's a good day. The 20 that got left behind that couldn't get fixed, we'll just give them a new product. I mean, that's a cheap way out in my book. But goods are one thing, but services are just as big an issue when it comes to sending our jobs overseas.
Hey, Jim, I'm going to spend the last few minutes of this podcast talk about the Facebook bureaucracy we've been facing this week. It's been quite the challenge. Facebook is quite the challenge. We're glad. Thank God we didn't have these problems with YouTube. Thank you for YouTube for letting us live stream today, because you don't have any restrictions to live stream on YouTube. Want to let everybody know what's going on with Facebook and the mediocrity that goes on with that company. There's a lot of good things that Facebook does, but my God, when you have problems on Facebook, it is like they are the judge, jury, and executioner. Wouldn't you agree, Jim?
Oh yeah, there's no recourse.
Yeah. So a couple things that happened. Hey, we stood up this page, right? We had good intentions with this page. Obviously, we're calling ourselves the Signal Brothers because Jim and I were in the U.S. Signal Corps together, right, in the U.S. Army. And we were using the signal flags from the U.S. Army, and obviously, immediately we started getting complaints from Facebook that we weren't following community guidelines. We made the changes. If you notice, our icon is different, right? That's a icon we paid for commercially, so we can use it commercially, right? So we're all legal on that. But every day we were getting these threatening messages from Facebook that we weren't following community guidelines, so they were going to shut down our page, right? Without any details of what we're doing wrong. And we had written back, we'd asked for a review. Once we realized we were violating the trademark agreement on anything government, right, we obviously changed that and got in compliance. But when you're doing something wrong, 9 out of 10 times, people don't do it maliciously, right? They do it because they want to do the right thing. And man, they would not give us any details. And we started getting messages every single day that they were going to shut down our Facebook page. Yes or no, Jim?
Oh yeah, it took a while to actually see them and get to the point where I could respond, and I still have got nothing back. And they were so vague. Some of them were so vague, and some of them were so poorly descriptive. It's like, okay, we did this. Okay, can you at least expand on what we did so we can undo it? Not to mention, we had just created the page. We only had a couple of postings. Most of them was that picture. So what did we violate? We haven't done anything yet.
So to take it a step further, right? We did a bunch of advertising to get people into the page, and all of a sudden, my personal Facebook page. Anybody who knows me, if you go to find my personal Facebook page, good luck finding it, because it's shut down and disabled right now. Right? It's shut down and disabled because they thought somebody was maliciously accessing my page. So I did everything I could to get back into my page, right? And I can't get back into the page. I have done the phone number reset. I've done the email reset. I've done the credit card verification. I've done everything that Facebook has asked me to do. And once I get to the point where it tells me to click on next, that, hey, yeah, we confirm this is your account, click next to secure your account, it won't go any farther. So here's the funny thing about it. I stood up the Signal Brothers page, but I can't access it. Only Jim can access that page now, right? And there is nothing I can do. There's no link. There's no way to contact Facebook. There's zero way to get support. Well, here's the other thing that me and my wife came to realize yesterday. I log into Spotify using my Facebook account, and I pay for Spotify, right? I'm paying for the Duo, which is, I don't know, like $17 a month. Not a lot of money, but guess what? Now I can't even get into Spotify, my paid version of Spotify. right? And it's trying to reach out to Spotify. Hey, how do I get away from the Facebook account? And they said, well, log into Facebook and remove Facebook. Well, I can't remove Facebook. So I don't know if any of you have had these problems with Facebook, right? And I'm not putting down, hey, I am happy that they thought something fraudulent was happening and they locked down my page. Kudos to them for doing that, right? But I am absolutely frustrated that there's no way I can recover from it, right? There's no way to get back in. So I'm just leaving the darn thing alone. And to be honest with you, for those of you that know me, if I'm not in by Monday, I'm probably just going to let it go, because after 30 days, they will just permanently shut down the Facebook account. Jim, have you had any experiences with Facebook like this?
I have one, and I'm not even sure why it happened, but I went ahead and requested a review, and I had to wait 72 hours. I had to send them my phone number and a few other pieces of information, and then just wait. And I waited and waited, and I was sweating it, because I got on Facebook back in 2008, and my daughters and I have a group message, and I can trace that group message back years and years and years. I'm like, I don't want to lose all that. So, I'm sweating it, and all of a sudden I get an email, and it says, okay, you go here and reset your password. And I got back in, but I never did know why I got locked out. I had no recourse. I filed the review, and it said, we'll review this within 72 hours. And I just had to wait.
Well, I wish I could do something to get a review. And, I can't even get a review done. So it is what it is. I'm not going to lose sleep on not having access on Facebook. There are many social other media platforms that we can use out there. And again, I want to thank YouTube, right, for letting us do a live stream. One of the requirements we wanted to live stream initially on Facebook, but couldn't do it because you have to be on Facebook. You have to have your page established for so long. You have to have so many followers. There's all these rules before you can do a live stream on Facebook. And there's probably a lot of good protections to prevent somebody from doing something crazy out there on their initial live stream. And kudos to them. But none of that's laid out in advance when you stand up a page and you want to do a live stream, right? You find that stuff out after the fact. Mm-hmm. So, hey, Jim, we're coming up on top of the hour here. And I think we should. I'm just curious. I would love some feedback. We still got 7 listeners listening in. Believe it or not, they listened to us for a whole hour. I'm pretty shocked. Either we're talking about some good stuff or something. We'd be interested to know some feedback from our listeners. What did you think about our first podcast? Right? If you could put some comments in the chat, and also let us know what you'd love to hear next week when we do this next Saturday. Right. We'd be interested in knowing what subjects you'd love us to talk about. So, Jim, any final comments from you?
No, I just I want to thank YouTube for hosting us, and this was a good time, and I think we'll just get better from here as we polish it up a little bit, get in the routine.
Absolutely. And we look forward to having guests on our podcast, right? We think that's an important part, because this initial podcast was Jim and I talking, right? We want to bring other people on with diverse views and maybe that don't necessarily agree with our views, right? I'd be interested in having folks like that on to talk out their perspectives on stuff. How about you, Jim?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been many times, like I said earlier, the most important opinion I ever hear is the one that disagrees with me, because, that's how I learn and grow. I hear something, I may hear it in a perspective I have not heard before, and it will cause me to think about it. One or two things will happen. Either I'll say, you know what, he's right, I'm going to switch over to that frame of thinking, or nope, I'm right. I'm more solid in my beliefs now. But either way, I've learned something. I'm not stagnant.
I got some good friends, right, that don't share same opinions about some of the things, my thought process. What's great is we can sit down and have a constructive conversation. And while we may not agree, we're always able to find common ground. One of my good friends, Virginia, is a classic example. Her and I are on the adverse, extreme opposites of the political spectrum. But Virginia and I, we're great friends, and we can talk things through, right? And there's things we just will not agree on, and that's okay. It's okay to not agree, But the key is we're able to have that conversation, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the comments in there. We're seeing some comments from Ed, Josh, and Annie. We do appreciate that feedback. And again, we would love some ideas for next week's podcast, right? Because we're going to do the same time, same day. We'd love any ideas. We'll definitely put something together for next week and let you all know what we're going to do. But if you have any ideas out there of something you'd like us to talk about, please put it in the chat or reach out to Jim and I if you'd love to be on the podcast. We'd love to have some guests on the podcast to join us in the conversation.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jim.
And we are
the Signal Brothers.
Everybody have a great day.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.